Anita Sarkeesian. A blast from the past as well as perhaps from the ass, and one of the old-school key core cardinals of the tenets of wokeism, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion, has emerged once more to beg for to weigh in on the current year political debate by stating that not only does diversity, equity, and inclusion not work, it is actually actively making companies and their cultures worse. I could have told you this years ago. In fact, I'm pretty sure a near unified internet did tell you this years ago, but well, details. And hey, credit where credit is due. Anita Sarkeesian is in essence the mother of the current day anti-SJW movement. She virtually created it, which sounds perhaps a little bit counterintuitive, but if it was not for Sarkeesian's series of tropes against women, well, half of the anti-SJW people you know today probably wouldn't even have existed. Entire YouTube channels and careers were dedicated solely to pounding that awful series in every single orifice imaginable. Literally. Some people have of course moved on from that, in fact most of them to varying degrees of success, natürlich, but she did pretty much wake everyone up to the problems that were coming our way with the woke's infiltration of media and corporations. If it wasn't for Anita, most of us probably would still be at the point where we're looking at all of this and going, yeah, but our settings have always been diverse. Why are you pushing this nonsense without actually understanding any of the larger political ramifications of it? So, thank you, Anita, I do suppose. But the overall point of this article here is basically to say, I'm running out of money, hire me. As she offers ways to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion, because whilst by and large it has apparently not only failed, but in fact been actively subverted and taken over by the corporations, which I love the idea of that as well. Here you have the revolutionary people, right? The progressives, they're moving into the corporate sphere. They're gonna change things. They're really gonna institute some real change here. And the corporation looks at them and goes, communists, nom. Eats them, shits them back out again as their own version of diversity, equity, and inclusion. An organization primarily meant to shield the corporation from public backlash. And hey, that's kind of pretty much what it's being used for, isn't it? The recent Hogwarts Legacy nonsense, for example, is an excellent example of a corporation basically taking the tenets of wokeism, paring it down to its absolute most basic bitch layer, and then draping it over itself as some sort of a protective garment. Of course, in that case, it didn't work out very well because, well, all the progressives hated it as a matter of faith, essentially. But all of it, everything from body type A to body type B, allowing a boy to join the girls' dormitory, to the transgender character, etc., everything was so eminently performative, as to make it absolutely and utterly clear what the actual goal of it was, to try and shield the game against critique. And that is one of the things that she is criticizing here. DEI has been co-opted or created by the powerful to become a shield against criticism and real change. Now, that is of course said by Anita Sarkeesian, the creator of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And seeing as she's one of the most protected individuals in the business, I can hardly disagree with her thesis here. Good God. But okay, let's steelman the position, alright? The idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion is to make sure that people of the correct skin color and background receive preferential treatment. That literally is as charitable as I am willing to be to this organization, because that is the actual goal of the organization. To the point where even, she says that one of the problems with the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts is that 76% of DEI officers are whites. Disgusting white. So says Anita Sarkeesian, a proud black woman. Presumably. I mean, in this day and age of transracialism, who even knows anymore? Unless you have the ability to make a little, status window pop up with a person's genealogy and ethnicity next to it, I can't even tell anymore, frankly. I suppose that's one of the benefits of being a child of my generation. I just don't really care about that sort of thing, but details. So, her suggestions here are: 1. Harm does not happen in a vacuum. Sarkeesian said it's not enough to find and punish the guilty parties who committed the harm. Of course not. When you find the witch, after all, the witch hunt is over, and you wouldn't want that. Instead, companies need to examine the conditions that allowed that harm to happen in the first place. What systems of power and oppression were present in the dynamic around a specific incident? Because, of course, the aim of it is to dismantle as much of it as possible in favor of the diversity, equity, and inclusion nonsense. I also want to point out the specific wording here: officers. Not employees, not like heads of management or anything. Officers. The language tells you everything you need to know. It is a conquest effort within the company, and that is why it being subverted into the corporation is such a negative thing. 2. We need to break cycles of harm and prevent further violence. One of the many words of the English language the Wokers have managed to render completely and utterly meaningless, as it no longer actually means violence. It means that at some point within the company, one person said something mean to another person. It is not enough to respond only to harm that's already happened. We need to keep it from happening again. And how exactly do you do that? Well, first and foremost, you've got to follow all of the tenets of the church, because it's not enough to simply just atone for sin, you must prevent further sin. And the definition of what is a sin will, of course, always continue to expand, because, as we know, what used to be perfectly okay is no longer okay. Which is why grievance archaeology is such a prevalent thing on the left. 3. We must support people who were harmed in their healing, and the people who caused harm in their accountability. We must support people in their accountability. You mean struggle sessions, don't you? You mean brainwashing them? Oh, those who were harmed need care and opportunities for peace and post-traumatic growth. But the people who cause harm also need a better way to reflect on and understand their own behavior. I was right. Struggle sessions and brainwashing. These two are interconnected because accountability enables a person to truly offer substantial acknowledgement, apology, and repair to those they have harmed, Sarkeesian said. Now, of course, as we've also seen, every time somebody apologizes for anything, that is only the start of their woes and miseries, because you cannot apologize, as Sarkeesian makes quite clear here. Apologizing is not enough. Taking responsibility is not enough. You need to fully admit to what you did, understand that it was a sin against the church, and you must then abide by the church's teachings in how you are to repent. And finally, this is about all of us. The current systems are failing us, and to break out of these cycles, we seriously need to skill ourselves up. Sarkeesian said, create stronger ways of being connected to each other, healthy relationships, de-escalation skills, irony, communication skills, expressing feelings in a non-destructive ways, and put the work into unlearning toxic narratives and beliefs. Like, none of this means a damn thing. Like, this is the thing that always impressed me about Anita. She has the ability to say a lot without actually saying anything. Every little decision you make, every case you handle, you've got to look at it through all of these lenses, all of these progressive lenses. In other words, again, you must adapt to the complete worldview of the progressive lens. You must view everything through the progressive lens. Every action, every thought, every idea, every opportunity, all of it must be viewed through the lens of progressivism, because it is a totalitarian ideology. And if there is any sort of discrepancy or any violation of the totalitarian ideology, then it is not good enough, as that is essentially what all of this boils down to. You can't say sorry without naming what you did wrong. You must understand the sin you have committed. It is, well, power, yet again. Because it's not good enough is basically the the religious chant of the modern day wokeist movement, because nothing you do can ever be good enough, because if it is good enough, you've reached the end point of progress, and if you stop progressing, well, you're no longer progressive, and the next guy in line will leap on over you and continue with an even more ludicrous demand. It is literally the very nature of this branch of political thought. It's inherent within it. There is no such thing as the utopia, or as they say, utopia is always just one more body away. It's not a joke, it is the actual reality of it all. But I find it very interesting as well. So, these initiatives are making culture worse. They are making the corporations worse. Because what it has done is it has essentially absorbed the diversity, equity, and inclusion nonsense. They've taken on the wording, they've taken on the performative outer appearance, and now they are shielded from critique by saying, but we did the thing. Like we clasped our hands, we offered a prayer to Dharma or whatever. You can't criticize us anymore. And of course, that is exactly the purpose of it as well. Again, I point you back to Hogwarts Legacy, a game absolutely covered in wokeist ideology, and yet that feels like it almost has no wokeist ideology in it at all, because it is also thoroughly wafer thin. It is a thin crusting added on purely for protective measures, rather than because anyone gave a shit or believed in the damn thing, heavens. And of course, with wider culture beginning to move more and more away from it, she also mentions that diversity, equity, and inclusion, God, I'm gonna say words, officers are also usually the first ones to get fired and axed, because that's kind of the key core of the reasons for this article. A lot of companies are now starting to get rid of their DEI initiatives because they cost an assload of money, they produce absolutely nothing. By their very nature, they cannot produce anything because they are a self-policing entity meant to protect against PR harm rather than make an actual product. And when you are finally in a setting where money is no longer free, streaming into your corporations through infinite investor firms, well, you gotta start prioritizing. And the PR protective shell that seemingly doesn't even do anything most of the time anyways, well, it is simply the least useful appendage of pretty much any corporation. In fact, it can easily be the one flailing most roughly against the main body, as seen by diversity, Disney and Florida, for example, where Disney as a company has managed to piss off the Floridan government so much that they've practically declared war on one another, and the only remaining question is how far the two parties are going to go in screwing with one another. After Disney essentially signed all of the government of the Really Quick Development Project over to themselves, neutering the Florida government and giving them nothing to do but, well, maintain the roads, etc. in the area. If I was DeSantis, well, I'd probably be asking my lawyers and government officials right now about every single possible legal way I could interfere with Disney's profits in. Maybe a new law specifically aimed towards entertainment parks of a franchise nature, maybe. Or maybe those roads, well, an awful lot of traffic goes on them. Perhaps they'll need to be shut down for extensive maintenance. And as for public transportation to Disney World, well, you know, seeing as we no longer have any real control over buildings, assets, and zoning rules, etc., is it truly safe to send buses into an area where we can't guarantee the structural integrity of everything built? Yes. DEI has proven to be near universally a negative force to most corporations. And even in the cases where they have served as some sort of a shield, like in the Blizzard lawsuit, for example, where they were able to accept a bunch of diversity commissars from the federal governmental entities suing them in order to see those lawsuits settled and dropped, even then, is they essentially introduced a bunch of foreign agents into the workings of the company who will now be busy producing further lawsuits in the future should they step out of line with the orthodoxy. A short-term solution that causes long-term cancer. It's hardly surprising that the people who are responsible for this are beginning to look at their future employment opportunities and, thinking that they might need to reinvest rather quickly in reinvigorating their selected branch. And hell, you know what? I've been thinking more and more about how artificial intelligence might start replacing certain jobs, and surely this one would be one of the quickest to go, because in AI, well, you can just program it to weigh in particular skin colors, and it already does 99% of the job that a diversity officer does. Voila! Yet another victory for our AI overlords. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.